Following the burning of the chapel in Boolavogue, Father Murphy, we know, went to his sister over in Owlert Hill. Now, the Battle of Owlert Hill, whereas it is significant in the larger sphere of things, it was quite insignificant from the point of view of the battle on Vinegar Hill. This, unfortunately, was the battle where Father John's friend and breakfast pal, John Donovan, was killed. Tom had said at the time, after Bucky and Donovan were killed, that he would not be coming back to Boolavogue to live. And he was quite right in that summation. The Battle of Vinegar Hill can be looked at from a particular point of interest with regard to Father Murphy. He had left Seville, where he finished his training. He had no great accolades, he had no gold medals, he had nothing to say that he was a brilliant student or anything. In fact, all they said about him was, when he was being sent back, that he was a very enthusiastic student who went at his studies in an organised manner. It is also interesting to note that, considering he was educated in hedge schools, that he was a fluent speaker of both Latin and Greek when he was 16. One of the points of interest about the Battle of Vinegar Hill, and particularly concerning Father Murphy, was a tactic which he used. He turned to some fellow beside him, one of the rebels, and he said, "Fire your rifle and reload it." The man did as he was asked. He shot his rifle, he reloaded it. Then Father Murphy said to the people around him, "Tell the men to take off their jackets or their shirts or their caps or whatever, and to put them on top of their guns or pikes or whatever it is they have, but not to let anybody see them." This word was passed along the rebels. They did as they were told. Father Murphy watched the progress of the yeomen up Vinegar Hill from Enniscorthy town. When he had got them into the range that he wanted them in, he passed the word along to the rebels to lift your caps or your jackets or whatever just over the brow so they can be seen. When they did this, of course, the yeomen thought they were all sticking their heads up to shoot at them, so they fired. That was great. That was exactly what Father Murphy wanted, because now he ordered the rebels to charge the yeomen. The yeomen had fired their guns, they couldn't reload them quick enough, and a lot of them got killed in the ensuing battle. However, the rebels were totally defeated at the Battle of Vinegar Hill, and Father Murphy and another priest set off for the Midlands. Their plan was they wanted to meet a contingent of United Irishmen coming up from Portlaoise. Unfortunately, for whatever reason, these United Irishmen were met by a huge British force in Athy, and they were driven back. While Father Murphy and the other priest were in a house in Tullow on their journey for refreshment or to stay overnight or whatever, a yeoman patrol came into the house. They initially quizzed them about where they were going, where they were coming from, what the nature of their business was, and initially it appears that they were quite happy to let them go on their way. Just as the patrol was leaving the house, one of the yeomen noticed that these two ordinary men had a pyx hanging around their neck. Now, a pyx was a little rectangular stone with a cross on it. It was affectionately known as the Gospels. It was handed out by the Catholic hierarchy to the priests. The priest, when he got it, he put a piece of string through it and he hung it around his neck. One of the yeomen copped the string on their neck and turned to the lieutenant and said, "These men are not ordinary citizens, they are connected to the cloth." They took Father Murphy's friend out, they quizzed him about where he was going to, where he was coming from. He wouldn't tell them anything. Because he would tell them nothing, he was of no value to them, so they shot him. Then they brought out Father Murphy. Now, we don't know whether he told them who he was or somebody recognised him and told them who he was. If you realise that Father Murphy was born and reared in Tincurry, which is about 6 or 7 miles from where he now is. His father was a bacon curer by trade, and so he would have, as the horseman, travelled all the market towns for a number of years before he became a priest. He would have been very, very easily recognised in this area. However they found out who he was, we don't know. But we do know that when they discovered that they actually had this notorious priest, there was a very quick court-martial held whereby he was found guilty. Their reaction to that was quite simple. They cut off his head and they stuck it up on a post. That may have been as a warning to others not to have anything to do with the United Irishmen, or it may have been as a trophy, we don't know. They then took the rest of his body and they threw it into a pitch barrel that was on the side of the road and set fire to it. That definitively is all we know about the demise of Father Murphy. There is no grave, there is nowhere to mark where he is buried because nobody knows where he is buried. There is what I can only refer to as touristy folklore, but I stress this is not fact, it is folklore. One part of this is that his aunt, who lived locally, collected his head off this post and his arm. Now his arm, apparently when they threw his body into the barrel, his arm hung outside the barrel and that didn't burn. But she collected his arm and his head off the post and she brought it back to have it buried in Ferns Cemetery with his mentor, Father Casson. Now, there are a number of reasons why that is highly unlikely. The first is, if you were to get from Tullow to Ferns, carrying the head and the arm of this notorious priest, you would pass through maybe 8 or 10 or 12 yeoman patrols on that journey. Each and every one of them would ask you what the nature of your business was. The very first one that you suggested to them that you were taking the priest's head and his arm back to Ferns for a Christian burial, they would undoubtedly save you the trouble because his head, his arm and whatever was left of your body would end up in the local bog. That journey would not be made successfully. Apart from that, Father Casson's nephew was a priest. 20 years after this, he died and requested that he be buried with his uncle. This request was agreed, but when they dug up his uncle's grave in Ferns Cemetery, there were no extra bones. What happened to him, we don't know. There is some theory that he is in a mass grave in a place called Mullane outside Tullow. Whether he is or not, nobody knows for certain.
But his spirit lives on.
His spirit, however, does still live on around the buildings in this yard. A number of people come in here, great interest in Father Murphy and what he tried to do, great interest in the story, and great interest in the people and the place of Boolavogue. The song Boolavogue, which was written by a chap called Patrick J. McCall, was actually written to commemorate the events of 1798 for the 1898 anniversary. Now, the song that P.J. McCall wrote, he wrote a tune to go with the words, which was quite boring. And for that reason, it was a song which didn't really take any great interest for people around the area. Another reason that it didn't take any great interest was because of the actions of the local priest. People in Dublin and Wexford had commissioned a monument to be made to commemorate the events of 1798 for the 100-year anniversary in 1898. When this monument was made, it was put on the train in Dublin, it was sent down and taken off the train in Ferns. They put it on a horse and cart and they brought it out here to the village of Boolavogue. It was met on the outskirts of the village by the local parish priest. He told them that because the events of 1798 had flown in the face of the bishop of 1798, that the monument had no place in the parish. The monument was taken back out of the village, it went down a lane, it went into a field, and it lay in a ditch for 50 years. It has now been resurrected and stands up in Boolavogue graveyard beside a small headstone which has the following inscription: in memory of Shorehole Jack Murphy and his wife Nancy, who requested that he be buried on the spot where he knelt to be shot. If you look at that small gravestone in the middle of the old graveyard in Boolavogue, you will notice that there are not any graves surrounding it. The reason for that is that is the site of the original church.
We took a molen and a scorty, and Wexford storming drove out our